Hello and welcome to our St. Paul Learn with the League. My name is Cheryl Bailey. I'm a League board member and the co-chair of the program committee. I'm moderating tonight's presentation. Where does your child go to school? Many thanks to the Roseville and White Bear Lake area leagues for their support of our programs. We hope you'll check out their websites. Roseville has a program on Indigenous organizations on March 19th, and the St. Paul League has a program on March 26th that we'll talk about at the end of the program. Also, thanks to the St. Paul Neighborhood Network and the Suburban Community Channels, they tape and broadcast our programs. And you can also find this and previous programs at our YouTube site. Please search LWVSP. Go ahead and ask at the Q&A if you have any questions during the program, and please forgive any errors from the closed captioning. Well, why are we talking about charter schools tonight? Well, there are over 180 charter schools in Minnesota with about 68,000 kids going to them, and these kids matter to all of us. We just can't imagine the ripple effect of these kids' lives into the fabric of Minnesota, the Midwest, and the world. So let's clear up what a charter school is. Charter schools are public schools. As you can see there, they're publicly funded. They're not religious schools. There's no fees or tuition to enroll. And about 7% of kids going to public schools in Minnesota attend a charter school. The other public schools are called traditional district schools. They are primarily run by the school district. They don't need the authorizer. So all teachers in charter schools must be licensed, and that's the same for the traditional district schools. In addition, Minnesota plays a really special role in the development of charter schools. We were the first in the nation to pass a charter school law. Our speakers will help us tonight to understand the secret sauce of charters. They'll teach us what distinguishes them from their traditional district peers, and they will clarify some misunderstandings that they often hear about charters. Before I introduce our panel, let me give you some data about students and teachers in traditional district, charter, private, and home schools. You can find all of this information for yourselves at education.mn.gov. This table shows you the Minnesota Department of Education info for the current school year, showing the 181 charter schools. The top number is how many districts are in Minnesota. And then the next slide here shows the current school year with 2,252 public schools. And again, that includes the 181 charters. Enrollment for 2022 was 871,000 kids in public schools. And again, about 7% of those are in charter schools. According to the Minnesota Department of Education, this is the most recently available data on private schools and homeschooling. And you can see that 26,000 kids are being homeschooled in Minnesota. There are 464 private schools, and they teach about 73,000 kids, or again, about 8% of the kids in Minnesota. This is apparently pretty close to the national average for private school attendance. And keep in mind that for private schools, they have no requirements to be registered, approved of, or licensed by the state, and the state has no say in the length of the school year or school day or who they accept as students. And importantly, teachers in private schools are not required to be licensed. So my research showed average tuition in Minnesota is about $7,100 for kindergarten or for elementary school, and somewhere around $13,000 for high school. And those are, there are schools that are quite a bit higher than that, but that's an average. So let's get on with it. I'd like to introduce our first speaker, Mr. Jon Schroeder, and he is truly one of the founders of charter schools. Jon led the way in Minnesota policy. He has served on boards of countless organizations designed to promote and study charters. And in addition to his critical role in this topic, it's also a pleasure to welcome Jon to the program because of how he met his wife, Dana. He was doing research while he was working at the Citizens League, and she was a grad student at the Humphrey School of Public Affairs. So I told him that he sounds like a true lifetime League member. So Jon, welcome. If you wouldn't mind putting your camera on, people can see you. And then our next speaker will be Carrie Bakken, and she is, you can see her bio here. She was hired in 2001 in the first team of teachers at Avalon School, and this is a St. Paul school near Vandalia and University Avenues. She's now the program director there and the social studies advisor. And did you show your picture, Carrie? There we go. And then I don't know if we've got Tony showing yet. I'll go to his slides and we'll see. We've also got, last but not least, Tony Simmons, and he is the executive director of the St. Paul High School for Recording Arts. And I would love you in the audience to do a favor for yourself and visit their website to watch the video of how HSRA's founder, David T.C. Ellis, went from playing music with Prince and George Clinton to recognizing his role in the lives of the young kids who kept gathering around him in the studio. And that's how the school started. So we'll go one at a time with our speakers. Jon is going to give us the big picture view of how charters came to be and why he feels they're important. And we'll all close our screens off. I'll stop sharing, and Jon, take it away.
Ladies, thank you very much. And the first thing I want to say is that I am not a techie. And so the slides that I have are low-tech slides, just a couple of them. The first one documents my long association with the League of Women Voters. And if you can see this picture, there is a young man in the background. This is taken in 1971 when I was a student at McAllister working on lowering the voting age. And the League of Women Voters was one of our strongest supporters. And here I am waiting in line behind some League of Women Voters members to testify at the legislature. I got involved in charter schools and education policy along the way, I guess heightened after Senator Dernberger, whom I worked for, went on the Labor and Human Resources Committee in the Senate, which has jurisdiction over education policy. And I had been following the broadening of public school choices in Minnesota in that position, and closely following the passage of the charter law. And as soon as it passed, got connected with Member Reichgott-Young, who was the chief author in the Senate, and we put together the legislation that eventually became the Federal Charter School Grant Program, providing startup funds for public charter schools all across the country. And I want to emphasize too that I come at this, unlike our other two speakers, from a policy perspective. I really do defer to teachers on what goes on in the schools, although I do consider myself a lifelong learner. And I'm a parent of 3 graduates of Minneapolis Public Schools, one of whom is now a kindergarten teacher in Boston. And we also have 2 middle school students in the Robin Middle School. We've already heard what some of the things are that distinguish charter schools from district schools, or what are the major characteristics. I want to really emphasize, though, that the principal motive here was to try to create, to expand upon the notion of choice, school choice, to add choices, because choice isn't really worth much unless you have choices. And in Minnesota, that happened over a period of years, largely under the leadership of Governor Rudy Perpich, and I must say a democratically controlled state legislature. And the chief authors of the charter legislation followed post-secondary enrollment options and expanding a choice between and among districts, so that you could go to a school, public school, in another school district through open enrollment. All of that legislation was originated with Democrats, and that's a really important notion here to emphasize, that by expanding choice and choices within public education, this has been and continues to be broadly supported on a bipartisan basis. Charter schools are, generally speaking, smaller. In fact, the two schools that are featured here tonight are evidence of the viability, the fiscal sustainability of small secondary schools, which I think we've been told are not feasible unless you have 100 students per grade or something that arbitrary. Charter schools are also held accountable for their outcomes, and they have a contract or a charter with an authorizer. In Minnesota, school districts can grant charters, post-secondary institutions, nonprofit organizations, and we even have some nonprofit organizations that were created explicitly to become charter authorized. We've heard some of the data about the growth in chartering, and well, partly because of demographic changes, but also because of broader choices, traditional district school enrollment in Minnesota is declining, while enrollment in public charter schools has been growing. And even though it's not public, the fastest growing element of education in Minnesota is homeschooling. And it's important to point out who are making these choices to opt out of the traditional district system and go into other public schools, or to make other choices other than their neighborhood school or the school the district that they live within, or the attendance area that they live within. And disproportionately, these choices are being made by lower income families of color, particularly in Minneapolis and St. Paul, but that's true in increasingly diverse suburban areas. Why? Well, I think it's best to ask them, but certainly concerned about achievement gaps, how families feel they're being treated in the district system, a greater sense of ownership, smaller scale, and I think safety within the school and to and from the school. To the point that there are, particularly in Minneapolis and St. Paul, elementary charter schools that literally pick up kids at the door, just like Head Start does, and bring them home. And that's a really big issue if you ask those families.
John, I'm going to interrupt you there because I think that hops right onto some things that Tony was going to talk about. And Tony has something he'll need to step away shortly after he's given his presentation. So if you don't mind, I'm going to have Tony step in and tell his experience a little bit with his high school for recording arts.
Yeah, I think I've said as much as I need to say, but I'm happy to defer.
We'll get you back on as soon as Tony's done. And Tony, welcome are you in Denver?
Yes, I'm in Denver. Can you see me?
We can see you and we can hear you. Thank you for coming. I'm sorry you got issues. And so let's hear your experience and specifically about what John was just saying about parents choosing what's safe for their kids, where their kids feel respected, and et cetera.
Sure. And first, thank you for inviting me here. And I just want to say Jon is a giant. I came into education not being formally trained as an educator, and that's part of the history of our school that I'm going to speak to in a short minute. But Jon was one of those people who really helped our founder, David T.C. Ellis, that you mentioned earlier, and myself really understand what it meant to have a school that's based around innovation, equity, deeper learning, and ability to have a space, a small school space where young people feel safe and families feel heard. So I want to thank Jon for that. And my good friend Carrie at Avalon, they've always been a place that we've gone to learn from and to share our practices with, and just a great partner in this work. But Jon hit it right on the point. Chartering really is about choice, and for me is most importantly about choice for those families that have been the most marginalized and oppressed. And what I mean by that is obviously on a socioeconomic level, their choices of where they can live, what options they have in terms of the marketplace of learning that goes even beyond public schools is limited if any at all. And there's other just life factors that happen when you're not at a position of power either economically or racially or all of the major things that we think of that enables a person to have privilege and power. So chartering really has helped many families be able to find an alternative to learning for their for their children other than their neighborhood school where that may not have been working for them. And not working may mean, a child is literally failing, not just struggling, but on the track to being disengaged from learning altogether, and eventually maybe even being pushed or kicked out of school and becoming so-called dropped out. And we know that that has dire consequences in a young person's life to not be able to complete school and have a high school diploma. So having given a family with limited options, the option of a quality school that is accessible to them and is safe and is engaged in learning in a way that is not just about teaching to a test, but is really applying 21st century innovative practices, a sense of democracy and equity, and all of the things to really help nurture a young person in terms of them becoming a learner and becoming a lifelong learner. Chartering has really been able to do that in so many instances. Chartering is there's not one charter school and one way of doing it. There are some charter schools that practice some of the traditional ways of the traditional district school systems. But the chartering that I know that was meant when Jon and others who wrote the original charter law in Minnesota, based around innovation, based around equity, those schools really do have and continue to make a difference. And that's how High School for Recording Arts came into existence. David, our founder, like you mentioned, was a recording artist with Prince. I was helping him in his work as a recording artist, and eventually he opened up a recording studio, and his whole aim was just to be in the music business. But over time, young people were showing up to his studio, wanting to learn more about music. They were super creative, but they weren't in school. And David would ask, "Why aren't you in school?" And they say, "Well, school's boring. I got kicked out. They don't understand me there. They don't listen to me." And David said, "Well, education is important still. You need to learn how to read. You need to learn how to write. You need to learn how to think, problem solve, collaborate." And they were like, "Well, that's why we're here at your studio." So that light went off for David to engage these young people in a way that the traditional system wasn't doing for them. And that's how the High School for Recording Arts came into existence, to serve that particular population. And so, we're proud of that work. We're proud of continuing to focus on the young people who have been pushed and kicked out of schools. But we still see ourselves as a partner within this whole general ecosystem of the public school sector, where chartering and district schools are all important as part of the menu of options for families. Every family has to make a decision. What is the right best fit school for their young person? And if a family has more than one child, say they have 3 or 4 childs, 3 might be fine in a district school, but one may really be struggling or actually failing. It's a great thing for us in Minnesota to have a public option for a family that may not be able to just move into a different or better neighborhood for a better school, or send their young person to a private school, or even homeschool. They may have to work 2-3 jobs. Having a quality charter option that's really going to serve their young person is really a huge benefit to our community.
Tony, I walked through your school. Your administrative assistant toured me, and it's a pretty small facility, but everyone was calmly walking around, and she showed me the studio, and I said, "So kids are wanting to play music here?" And she said, "Oh no, they do their work. They do their math and their science and their reading. This is a bonus." Can you talk about what the role of the studio is in your high school?
Sure, that's a
Just the
great
academic
question.
achievements that your kids have.
Yeah, sometimes people think that, our aim is to create the next hip hop artist or recording artist, and that could happen, but our real aim is to have our young people really understand their creative assets and how that can lend itself to all fields of human endeavor and all core content areas. So we train our staff to engage a young person who may just really want to be in the studio. They want to tinker, they want to write a song, make a song, and that's fine. We want to get them engaged in that process, happy, joyful, but at the same time, we want to start having them understand the connection between that creative mindset that they have to areas like English, math, social studies, and science. So our core content licensed teachers go into those spaces with the young people. They help them understand, that process of learning in terms of even just the music creation, but also in terms of the messaging that they're writing in their lyrics and the content that they're producing for it. We had a teacher who was very much not into hip hop, but did a hip hop album based around climate change that won Sierra Club Awards, national NAACP awards for the content and the level of understanding of scientific aspects of climate change that our young people were able to demonstrate through that creative process. So we believe creativity is the 21st century currency. Having our young people really understand how powerful that creative mindset and currency that they have and how it could lend them in so many ways to being a real productive citizen and a community change agent.
And your kids take the MCAs, the standardized state administered tests, and
Every student in the state of Minnesota has to take the same tests that the traditional public school students have to take.
I'm not sure if private schools students have to take the MCA.
No, I'm saying public schools.
Yeah,
the
yeah.
traditional public
Yep.
schools.
So your charter students do that, and they do the standard curriculum. Can you talk to us about what?
I think it's not, I wouldn't call it a standard curriculum. I think that's where the difference becomes.
Okay.
We believe in project-based learning. We believe in innovative practices. We believe that a lot of the reasons why chartering came into existence was that it was hard to reform traditional district schools from the teach and get, as opposed to the real world experiential constructivist way of learning. And so we believe in that, as opposed to a teacher coming in with a curriculum script. We believe that it's better to have young people understand that learning by doing is the best way to learn, that really becomes relevant to them and is sustaining for them over the course of their lives.
Does your high school do anything with transportation for kids getting to and from school, or do they get to the school on their own?
Yeah, we give all of our young people Metro cards that they could use 24 hours, 7 days a week. So we support our students in that way so that they could get to school without having any cost.
And then people are asking about, are there any specific organizations that you all as charters belong to? Do you have meetings together? Do you know Carrie, Jon? How do you all stay in touch with each other as charter schools in Minnesota? Is there such a thing, like a monthly meeting or conferences or?
Sure, there's all different types of places that we intersect. There is a Minnesota Association of Charter Schools, and so we're all, it's a membership organization, so most of us are members of it, and that's a space. But we also come into spaces just around our innovative learning practices. There's also the Minnesota Association of Alternative Programs, and You know, that's another group that understands the work of dealing with so-called at-risk or severely at-risk students, alternative students, some type of challenge that they may have in their lives. So there's a number of ways that we come together, and like I said, we share best practices. We visit each other. We go to conferences together, and we are part of a community that is supportive of each other.
Tony, some people are asking how do parents come to you? How for your school in particular, and then in general, people are wondering how do parents find out? I have just graduated 2 kids, and I know that we got all sorts of things from the district about different. There'd be a big, huge get together with all the schools and all their pamphlets and the principals and so on. So there were a lot of chances for people with young kids to meet, but how do people get in your door? How do students find out about you, and how do parents say, I want my child to come to your school?
Yeah, another great question. So we're a high school, and we're a re-engagement high school. And what I mean by that, most of our students come to us having already been out of school, on average about a year and a half. So significant out of school time, and we believe that those students up until they're 21 have a right to a free and public education, and it's a great social impact benefit for the state of Minnesota to re-engage them. So most of our students come to us actually through word of mouth. They tell other young people about them. Half of our students live on their own, and we have a significant number who are houseless, and that's not unusual, unfortunately, in the metro area. But we have an even higher percentage than most. And I'm saying that to say, so the family dynamic part is still there, but it's not as much as it might be with younger students or in most other spaces. But for families that do send their young people to our school, they just heard about our work. We get a lot of free publicity. There's a lot of coverage of the work our students have done. We talk about our students through our student work. That's how we advertise, and their work, just like at Avalon and other great schools, their work is about public exhibition of what they know and sharing with the community, interacting with the community. And when you do that on a consistent level, the community hears it and hear about it. And most of the families that come to us knowing, about that body of work and demonstration of level of learning for young people.
Can I sneak one more question in before you
Sure.
go?
Yes.
Can you give us a rough idea of what your students do once they've graduated from your high school?
Yep.
Graduation rates, and what kinds of things do they do after school?
Sure. So the most important thing is that they graduate. And again, for young people who weren't going to graduate likely, getting to the point of having a high school diploma is the biggest deal. And of course, we just know that when you look at research, that sends them off to a life that's productive rather than dependent. As a re-engagement school, we probably graduated about 85% of our 12th graders, which is a re-engagement metric that is, nationally recognized. And most of our, we have all of our students graduate have to have a college acceptance letter. They have to have their financial aids fully filled out. And again, with many of them living on their own and coming from marginalized families, we're intent on supporting them, filling out all of the paperwork to get into college and to have their financial aid done, whether their parents are there or not able to support that. So what we found, just anecdotally, we haven't been able to do, real definitive research, is that our students are just in working. They're producers. They're engaged. They're taking care of themselves and their families in all the various kind of fields. We have an unusual large amount of students that have been really able to sustain themselves in music and entertainment, and some who've done extremely well. And we're really proud of that. But I'm just as proud when I go down to the Marriott Hotel downtown Minneapolis, and I see one of my students being a manager of the hotel there. To me, I'm as proud, if not more proud, than one of my students who was nominated for a Grammy Award.
Well, I thought it was thrilling to walk through your school, and I'm glad to hear more about it from you, and the good work that you're doing, and the good work that your teachers are doing, and the good work that your students are doing. So
And again, you know, to Carrie and all of the great people at Avalon and Jon, so many people are doing incredibly good work, and I just have to say, really, really hard work. And I hope the community recognize that, and that we see this public sector space that we're all in as something that we should continue to learn more about and hold in high regard, so that we could do the best we can for our young people in the community.
thank you.
Okay, take care.
I know you have to dash, and I'm going to go to my screen share, and we'll have Carrie come on next. Thank you again, Tony Simmons, for joining us.
Thank you.
And Carrie, I'm going to get your slides up. There we go. And I'm going to stop my video and go ahead. Welcome, Carrie from Avalon School.
Yeah, I have to start with a big shout out to Tony. I don't know if you jumped off, and Jon, of course. I owe my entire career, and we've graduated hundreds, if not 1,000 students over 20 years. And really Jon's work making chartering possible, and Tony, who I met over 20 years ago and learned about HSRA as one of the true project-based models. While we were all growing up, I guess, in the charter sector. As I said, we were all pretty new, and seeing what the potential was. So yeah, we just had HSRA students last week visiting, and we always send our staff and students to HSRA too, to learn about hands-on learning and all the great work they do. So I think the collaboration is super important, and I think what we do not, I mean, I know it gets put out there that it's a competitive arena. Schools are competitive or competing with students, and charters are competing with each other, and districts are competing with charters. And that's just not the reality. I think all parents and all students and teachers are just looking for the best fit. So I'm really grateful that it exists in Minnesota in the way that it does. It's really special the way it exists in Minnesota. It's not a corporate kind of model. It's a really homegrown, community-based, student-based, teacher-based program. And so I've been really grateful for my career at Avalon. So Avalon has been open since 2001. And we serve all our grades 6 through 12, and we're only 265 students. So people are looking for a smaller environment when they're coming to Avalon. We have 33 teachers and 9 paraprofessionals, but we're teacher-run school as well. So you can go to the next slide, Cheryl. It's really important that our students are empowered through project-based learning and designing their own curriculum with staff support. We're teacher-run. We do not have an executive director, although we have a lot of longevity and a lot of leadership. We are teacher-run. We're also community-powered in that our students get the most out of their education when they are connected to the community. Our demographics are a little bit different than maybe the traditional district of St. Paul. You can see the racial makeup there, but we also have over 53% of our students receive special education services. So we are built around serving learning differences really well. We don't have a high EL population. That's a little bit different than St. Paul Public Schools. But we have a really high LGBTQ population, and we've been serving and making a welcoming environment for transgender youth since pretty much the day we opened, actually. So we've been actually reached out to by many schools on how we deal with bathrooms and what our policies are, and we've been a leader in that sector. So teacher powered at Avalon, I think one of the myths of chartering is that teachers are highly controlled, and it's kind of a churn and burn model. And that might have come from different perspectives about national charters. At Avalon, and I haven't seen this in the Minnesota charters, but we are teacher run. So the teachers are deciding how to create opportunities for students. We're deciding the curriculum. We are hiring each other. We're mentoring each other. We're evaluating each other. We serve as the majority on the school board. We hire our finance people. We oversee the budget, and we allocate resources. So it's really high accountability, but we operate as a team. Student powered at Avalon looks like students designing their own independent projects, so we're heavily project-based, and I believe this is why we serve students with the learning differences so well. Students can be obviously super bright in some areas and then need more targeted support in others, and a project lends really well to this. So they also get to decide which classes they take and how they're going to meet all the state standards. So we're like Tony in that we have basic benchmarks that we have to fulfill, and state standards and state tests. But we also have, we also support students to do interest-based projects. So students have a student congress to make rules at Avalon. They support each other with creating new organizations. We partner with other charters. Again, this is a lot of the collaboration in the small charter sector, that we have robotics with other charters. We have sports with other charters. Students also can create organizations as they are curious about something. So community powered, we have so many students going out in the community doing internships. They are working in theater and arts and athletics and businesses and nonprofits. We also partner with higher ed quite a bit, and people are studying us and doing research on engagement and innovative practices. So I know Jon had said that one of the hopes of the chartering sector was also to pilot new innovative practices. And then we have definitely collaborated with large districts as well. We've had the teachers union in both St. Paul and Minneapolis to Avalon over the years. We've looked at how teachers can be more engaged and professional with both district schools. We work, as Tony said, some of our conferences that we're going with districts, traditional districts all over the country, but we're really focused on innovative practices. So these networks, some include both charters and districts, traditional districts and charters, and some include just charters, but there are many that support our work at Avalon. So what does this all do for kids, and why do they come? Well, many come for some of the same reasons that Jon mentioned and Tony mentioned. Some were really struggling. The sitting and moving through 7 periods in a day, or even block scheduling, was really challenging for their needs. Some had failed, some were disengaged, and just not, the lack of choice and opportunities were stifling for them. Some were bullied. A lot of our students come because the culture was difficult in a big setting for them. And then some just want to, we take advantage of PSEO opportunities and just wanted to be engaged in the community more easily than maybe a large district would. So some of our outcomes are our students with disabilities outperform the state. So on those MCAs, and they outperform the district average. So students with disabilities at Avalon perform almost as well as their peers, or general education without a disability in reading or math. They accelerate and they do really well. They also report really high school satisfaction. We have 75 to 80% of our graduates going on to college immediately, and then over the longer term, it takes it. I think, I don't know what that number is, but I know we've tracked it and I can't remember off the top of my head. Seniors all do a 300-hour senior project. Our juniors do a 150-hour junior project. I think because we can create these really awesome opportunities with students and get to know their families so well, we really have high staff retention. So I know this is a real concern of mine in the future because I'm getting older and I'm watching all these young people come in, and, you know, new teachers don't make that much money, and I'm worried about the profession, and I'm worried about the, like, what that's going to look like in the future. And I think it's really surprising me, but in our environment, we're fully staffed. So that means we have a high number of special education teachers, which are really hard to find. But I think it's because the job and the quality of the job and the impact that staff feel when they walk in the building and can really work individually with the kids. I think it contributes to their job satisfaction and staying. So I'm really proud of that.
Carrie, I'm going to leap right on to that because we've had a couple questions about how charter teachers are paid. Are you privy to any of that information? Do you have a separate pay schedule? Is it different from traditional district?
You know, Avalon really matches a traditional district. We try to stay competitive with Minneapolis and St. Paul, and I think we're pretty close. And so we are definitely competitive with a smaller district. And so every year I pull other salary scales and try to keep in line with that. But we do use a traditional salary scale where it's based on years of service and education. So it's fairly traditional in that regard. But yeah, we work on keeping pace because we want to attract good teachers, and it is important. And so we keep an eye on that. And like you had introduced, like, everybody is licensed, and so we're all contributing to a teacher retirement pension fund in the state. So we try to keep it matched as closely as we can.
And are charter teachers in the union? And will you be striking if the teachers strike? It's
not at Avalon, but there are some charters that are unionized, but they're not part of the St. Paul Teachers Union.
Okay.
So they create their own union in their own charter. We're just a teacher-owned school, and so a lot of, if people are dissatisfied, there's a lot of ownership and opportunity to make changes. But there are some, I think, charters that do unionize in bigger charter schools. But no, we won't strike with the St. Paul Public Schools or anything like that.
And Jon, I would love it if you'd hop on too with your video and join us in the conversation. Carrie, tell me one other thing. When I'd ask Tony, how does a parent come to your school? How do parents end up coming to your school, or do the kids come to your school? Do they hear about you and know from other friends? How do kids get in your door?
Yeah, some of it is word of mouth, but we are 6 through 12. So definitely our sixth graders, the parents are really seeking us out. You know, they're coming from elementary to school. In the high school, there might be a little bit more give and take of a student finds out about it and then pulls their parents in. And then we do have some students who are re-engaging in school and hadn't been in school. So a little bit similar, but we have less students like that, and that's Tony's school. So yeah, I think it's word of mouth. We do try to market, and we do try to get out there, but I would say if mostly it is, oh, have you heard about Avalon and what it's done for kids? Like, so if somebody's struggling, and it's not just kids who struggle, we have really high achieving students too who just needed something different. So
Just
yeah.
a quick comment on a couple of things here. To draw on, to underline a couple of things. One is that, you know, just as a generalist and somebody interested in what's going on in the world, I think that education today is characterized by a lot of things, but one common word is unhappiness. There are a lot of unhappy parents, a lot of unhappy students, a lot of unhappy teachers. And I think that what Carrie has said here is that that's upside down at her school, that there's a satisfaction levels in all three of those categories are on the positive side. And particularly for teachers, and I mentioned earlier that we have our youngest daughter is a kindergarten teacher in Boston, and So I get this firsthand of how teachers feel unappreciated and unrespected as a profession and individually. And that's something that we really need to provide some alternatives. We need to make sure that teachers are well paid, but there are other kinds of compensation in the teaching profession that are lacking, and respect is a key one. I happen to be a hands-on learner myself. When people ask me, so what did you major in college? I say internships. What did you, what was your high school experience? Which courses did you excel in? I answer leadership. That's where, and I went to I come from a real small town. So there were 65 students in my graduating class. And so everyone had to pitch in and assume leadership roles. And that I learned skills there that, I continue to use today. So hands-on learning is both effective, and it's a way to deal with unhappiness on the part of students. As far as resources, the Minnesota Association of Charter Schools has an excellent website. It's mncharterschools.org, mncharterschools.org. They have a directory there of all of the 181 charter schools in Minnesota, and you can actually do a search geographically or the level of grade levels of elementaries and middle schools, high schools, K-12 schools, 6-12 schools, like Carrie's is. You can do it by the kind of school, environmental learning or project-based learning or Hertz and kinds of learning. So that's an excellent resource that I would highly recommend, mncharterschools.org.
Jon, I want you to say your phrase of if you've been to one charter school.
And if you've seen one charter school, you've seen one charter school. This is all about chartering, really. It's how schools are created and then the ground rules under which they exist, as opposed to the kind of learning program that they have. That's, there are environmental charter schools, there are arts-oriented charter schools, but they're all different. Each one is different. And that's one of the pluses. Again, choice isn't worth much unless you have choices.
Carrie, do you feel like the vision that you had at Avalon 20 years ago has morphed, and do you have different strategies and different emphasis now than you did before? And who's making those decisions? Do you all as teachers decide together?
Yeah, a lot of times, yeah, we do. I think we've gotten so much bigger. We were 8 staff sitting in a circle, and I think all of us were under 30. It just, and that was a long time ago. And now I've learned a lot over that time period around charter school management and finance, and I've morphed more into the administrative side of things only recently, but or not recently. I've always had students, and I still teach as a part of my job, but it's the amount of work that's administrative is bigger and grown. But interesting, I think the core values are the same. I think we've had to adjust, and I think that's one of our strengths around COVID. Like, we were online within 2 days, whereas my kids were in Minneapolis and it took longer. Of course, it's a bigger organization, and we could turn around and be ready to change our program and decide, okay, now we're going to morph into this, but we want to create outside learning opportunities while we're still online we were so flexible, and so we were able to do that, like what's best for kids and how are we going to get them there, and what projects we're going to do, and can we get them outside safely. I think that was fascinating to see how nimble we could be. And I think that has been the case for 20 years. Like, if we try a schedule, right now we have a schedule in place that we designed a little bit post-COVID to create more social opportunities and and more constructed engagement opportunities. And now we're like, okay, well, we gotta keep upping that academics, and we gotta bring back rigor again, because you know, kids' skills were struggling. Now we're doing more skill intervention and more math intervention, and just things that we can do once we look at the data every year. And so it's actually exciting. And I think that's some of the excitement too, staying as a teacher at Avalon. I've learned about getting a new building, and there's growth there, but then you can still be teaching and still connected to kids. So I did send my kids to Minneapolis Public Schools, and so I really would love Minnesota to always think of these as our children, and we all want them to have a high school diploma. We know how debilitating that could be if you don't have one. And we all want them to not be disengaged after going through high school and find their passion and try. We've had many kids try their senior project and do an internship. And what they learn is that was great, but I don't want to do it for a profession. And these are the types of opportunities that we want to keep providing for our students. And, you know, if you come to Avalon, you would see a certain environment that might be right for one of your children, but not perfect for another one of your children. Maybe not the big, you know, school sports, or, you know, that's not our school. So, and we're not trying to be that either. So.
Yeah, the program committee decided on this topic a long time ago, but I've just been always trying to drum the drums about our public schools, and in seconds, anything negative that happens in them gets broadcast. And yet I hope the audience was impressed with 800,000+ kids in Minnesota are educated in the public school system, which includes charter schools. And it's critical to our well-being as a society that everyone helps our schools and loves our schools and tries to help our schools and our teachers.
Yeah.
Karen, do you have any, we try and end programs on if there's something that you wanted to bring up that you hadn't had a chance to talk about, or if you have an ask for viewers, if you have anything that you wish, you know, people who do not have kids in the school right now could do, whether it's spread the word that charters are not competing for your tax dollars or wasting your money or weird little experiments. I mean, what types of things could the public do that are supportive for your schools and Tony's school and charters in general?
Yeah, I think charters are still a small percentage of how students are educated in Minnesota. Technically, I mean, it's the numbers are high of students, but it's, you know, 8%. And so a lot of people may not have experience with charters. And so then it's easy to see a negative piece of news and think, oh, all charters are this, or have, you know, one experience of hearing about something, and then it just gets, because maybe you don't know, and you don't have a student in a charter school. So I think it's, you know, like all of our politics, like it is just good to just breathe and not jump on narratives. I know there's been negative press around some school financing when there was certainly bad actors, and bad actors permeate all sectors of our Minnesota, and so that makes me nervous, and I know charters are vulnerable. Like that's how I've always felt, is like, you know, we do have a 5-year contract every year, and we do have to hit certain metrics, and part of that is financial oversight, and we work really hard. We have a really strong fund balance. We're very tight financially. And then, and so we've worked and built that up over 20 years. And so when I see negative press or mismanagement of funds or embezzlement or these random, if you look at the total number, I know it's concerning. And so I guess we can't stop negative press, but I think just getting out there to check it out. And it really, like, I've had people come back and students say, do you know that you saved my life? Like Avalon saved my life. We have 3 staff members currently right now, 1 teacher and 2 educational assistants who have come back to Avalon because it was so wonderful for them. And that's the environment they always wanted to teach in or work in. And so and some of them, you know, they come 15 years later and they're like, I would be dead if it was, you know, it's just, it's heart-wrenching and you don't know you have that impact. But we need to create these different opportunities for kids. We just do. We can't expect them all to sit, you know, go to a 1,000-person high school. So
What do you do for transportation for kids to Avalon? Do they take the school bus, or do they get the city bus, or what do they do?
because they're older, we do the Metro Transit, but then, you know, with our younger ones, a lot of parents drop them off, or we're open earlier and later so that parents can pick up and drop off for the younger ones. We do have Metro Transit cards, and then in some cases we provide transportation based on special needs.
Well, thank you. Yes, John.
Couple of kind of closing comments here about, you know, what would we like to leave people with, and I think an open mind, and understanding that cars are not going to go away, and that it's really wasted political energy to try to do otherwise. We'd be much better working together to get the funding that's needed, or to get the ability to make changes at the school level, to empower teachers to deal with this unhappiness thing. You know, all three of our kids are Minneapolis public high school graduates as well. And we're very well served, I think, by one of the best high schools, public or private, in Minnesota. And so, you know, nothing is for everyone, but having choices is good.
Thank you. Well, I'm going to hop on our exit screen here, so give me just a moment.
And I want to say thank you for hosting us and inviting me.
We are so pleased to have had you. You guys were awesome, and the topic is fantastic, and we just appreciate you. So again, thanks to Jon Schroeder, Carrie Bakken from Avalon School, and Tony Simmons, who had to hop off from High School for Recruiting Arts. We appreciate all of you for taking care of our kids. And in case you hadn't heard, this is going to be a giant of an election year. So right now there's absentee voting going on for the presidential primary. So you can vote either in the Shoreview or Ramsey County Library, or you can go down to the elections office on Plato, or you can come in person to your spot on March 5th. You can see the other dates there. And please remember that the St. Paul League will be running candidate forums all during September. We would love for you to come and watch them in person, or check them out on our website. And please remember, vote 411. It's got everything you need to know about voting. If you would save March 26th, we would love that. We'll have a 7 p.m. Zoom on the Upper Mississippi River region, or UMR. I think it's an unfortunate sounding acronym, but there you go. And again, we're the league. We're over 100 years old. We study issues, we take positions, and we take action. We would love you to join us. Become a league member by going onto our website. And thank you so much again for the other leagues for supporting us, for SCC and for SPNN, and also so much for the viewers. We know that your time's precious. We really appreciate it. And spread the word. Have your friends watch it on YouTube in a couple days, and have a wonderful evening. Goodbye now.